Above a quiet town she soared. A pilot mocked, dismissed, ignored. Fighter jets came with deadly might, but her calm laugh cut through the night. A hero rising strong and true. The skies belonged to her, and few knew. Asterisk, if you love thrilling stories of courage and heroism, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an epic story like this one. Now, let's dive into the incredible journey of a pilot who is underestimated, mocked, and challenged, only to rise above it all. In the quiet morning haze of Fort Reynolds, a small U.S. military base nestled at the edge of a sleepy town in Kansas, Lieutenant Sarah Caldwell walked briskly across the tarmac. The autumn air had that sharp, almost metallic bite that hinted at the coming winter, and the first rays of the sun glinted off the rows of parked helicopters and fighter jets. Sarah's eyes, a sharp gray that seemed to pierce the dawn, scanned the aircraft with a practiced, meticulous gaze. She had always loved flying. Ever since she was a child growing up in Cedar Springs, she had spent countless hours gazing up at the sky, dreaming of the day she would soar above it, not as a passenger or a spectator, but as the one in command. That dream had carried her through a childhood marked by quiet determination, an adolescence punctuated by rigorous studies in aeronautics, and a young adulthood filled with the grind of military training. Nothing had come easily, especially not for a woman in a world that often whispered or shouted that she didn't belong. Today, as always, she was keenly aware of those whispers. "Hey, Caldwell," came a voice from across the tarmac, dripping with a kind of smirk that could make the sun seem dim. Sergeant Mitchell, one of the fighter jet pilots stationed at the base, leaned casually against a sleek F-16. His dark sunglasses reflected the morning light as he flicked a glance toward her. "You sure you're ready to handle a real bird? Or are we going to have to set up a crash course?" Sarah's jaw tightened, but she didn't falter. She had heard the jokes before. She had endured them for years. The subtle dismissals, the outright mockery, the doubting glances that seemed to say, "You'll never survive in the air with the big boys." "I'll handle it," she said evenly, her voice calm but carrying a quiet authority that made Mitchell pause just for a fraction of a second. That was enough. Mitchell laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Sure. Just remember, we don't hand out medals for staying in one piece." Sarah ignored him. She focused on her Apache helicopter, the H-64 that had become her trusted companion, more a partner than a machine. Its rotor blades gleamed with a subtle brilliance, and as she approached, she ran her hand over the smooth, armored frame. This was no mere hobby. This was her life, her skill, her proof that she belonged here. And she would not be underestimated. Inside the cockpit, the familiar smells of metal, oil, and electronics enveloped her like an old friend. She ran through her pre-flight checks with methodical precision, each switch and dial a step in the dance she had rehearsed countless times. Outside, the chatter of the base continued, but in the cockpit there was clarity, focus, and control. The mission that awaited her was a routine training exercise, but today's scenario had been arranged by the base leadership in a way that stung with personal irony. A squadron of fighter jets, led by some of the base's most arrogant pilots, would engage her in simulated combat. The exercise was supposed to test her skills, but she knew, deep down, it had been pitched as a chance to embarrass her dot as the engines roared to life, the vibrations traveling up through her seat. She recalled the words of her commanding officer, Colonel Daniels, even just this morning. "Caldwell," he had said, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his stern face. "Don't let them get under your skin. They're loud, but they're predictable. You have the skill. Trust it." She had nodded, swallowing the tension that always came when facing those who doubted her. Daniels had seen her potential, recognized the years of sweat and perseverance. She carried like armor. But recognition from him did little to quiet the mocking voices she had carried from the start of her career. As she lifted off the tarmac, the world below became a blur of earth tones and early morning fog. The small town of Cedar Springs lay just beyond the base perimeter, its red brick streets and quiet houses a stark contrast to the roar of military machinery and the chaos of the skies above. Sarah's hands were steady on the controls, each movement precise and confident. The fighter jets approached, sleek and intimidating, a shadow of the challenge she faced. Their formation was tight, professional, but their smirks over the combs, audible even through the thick headsets, betrayed a smug arrogance. "Ready to get schooled, Caldwell?" Mitchell's voice crackled over the radio. Sarah's lips curved into a subtle smile, almost imperceptible. She knew she had the advantage in maneuverability and strategy, even if they didn't expect it. The first engagement was a feint, the jets attempting to surround her. She reacted with calm precision, banking sharply, taking advantage of the Apache's superior agility in low-speed combat maneuvers. One by one, she avoided their simulated attacks, her sensors alert, her mind calculating trajectories and potential threats like a chess master. The radio chatter grew frantic. "She's fast. She's unpredictable," one of the younger pilots exclaimed. "Where did she learn to move like that?" Sarah's laugh, low and controlled, slipped through the headset, not mocking, but filled with a quiet confidence that unsettled them. It was the sound of someone who knew her worth and the limits of others' assumptions. Hours passed in the sky, a ballet of skill, strategy, and raw nerve. Each engagement saw her outmaneuvering the jets, her confidence growing with every successful maneuver. But it wasn't just about skill. It was about proving to herself and to the world that she was not a mistake, not an anomaly, not someone to be doubted because of gender or stature. By the time the exercise concluded, Sarah had not only held her own, she had dominated. The jets, once cocky and mocking, now carried a tension in their combs that bordered on respect. As she landed, the rotors slowing with a familiar hum, she felt the weight of the day settle in her shoulders. Not the weight of fatigue, but of quiet vindication. She had faced the jeers, the doubts, the underestimation, and emerged with her skill intact, unbroken, and undeniable. Back on the tarmac, she climbed out of the cockpit to face the pilots who had once mocked her. Their expressions were a mixture of embarrassment, grudging respect, and in some cases, disbelief. "Not bad," Mitchell muttered, unable to fully hide a grudging nod. "I didn't think you'd pull that off." Sarah met his gaze evenly, her own calm but fierce. "Underestimation is a dangerous game," she said simply, her voice carrying across the morning chill. "And I always play to win." As she walked away, the crowd of onlookers whispering and watching, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, the satisfaction of having turned doubt into triumph. She knew this was only the beginning. Challenges would come, and there would always be those who underestimated her. But for today, she had claimed her skies, and no amount of mockery could ever take that away. And somewhere deep in her chest, a spark of something stronger burned, an unshakable certainty that if anyone dared to test her again, they would hear more than a laugh. They would hear the roar of a woman who had refused to be anything less than exceptional. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Sarah returned to her quarters at Fort Reynolds, her mind still buzzing with the morning's victories. The small town below, with its tree-lined streets and quiet houses, seemed almost serene from the height of the base's control tower. But serenity could be deceiving, she knew. Out here, in the vast expanse of the sky, calm moments were rare and often misleading. The post-flight briefing was tense. Colonel Daniels had arranged a high-level exercise, far beyond the usual training. Scenarios. A squadron of fighter jets, including some of the most elite pilots in the region, would challenge her in a simulated real-world attack scenario. The stakes were higher than ever. While the exercise was framed as training, Sarah could feel the undercurrent of doubt from those who still viewed her as an anomaly, a woman who had somehow clawed her way into a world built for men. "Lieutenant Caldwell," Daniels began, his voice steady and authoritative. "This exercise is more than a test of skill. It's a test of strategy, endurance, and mental resilience. Your task is to defend the target area against multiple coordinated attacks. Keep your composure and remember your training." Sarah nodded. She had spent years preparing for moments like this, but no amount of preparation could entirely erase the tension she felt as she stepped back onto the tarmac. The morning air carried a chill, but it also carried the scent of fuel, metal, and determination, a reminder that this was the arena she had chosen. Her Apache hummed as she climbed into the cockpit again, the familiar comfort of the machine settling her nerves. She ran through the pre-flight checklist with meticulous care, each switch, dial, and control a testament to her discipline. Outside, the fighter jets formed a tight, intimidating formation, their pilots exuding overconfidence and barely concealed disdain. "Hope you're ready for the school of your life, Caldwell," one of the pilots, Lieutenant Riley, sneered over the COMMS. Sarah allowed herself a small, calm laugh, the kind that carried quiet defiance. "I've been waiting for this," she replied, her voice steady and resolute. The simulation began. The fighter jets surged forward in a coordinated strike, testing her agility and decision-making under pressure. Sarah's hands moved instinctively on the controls, her mind calculating trajectories, speeds, and angles with precision. Each maneuver she executed drew a reaction from the jet's frustration, surprise, and the first hints of respect, but skill alone was not enough. The simulation introduced unexpected challenges, sudden weather changes, unpredictable flight patterns, and deceptive formations designed to confuse and overwhelm her. Sarah's heart pounded as she navigated through the chaos, every instinct honed through years of training guiding her actions. Despite the pressure, she found moments of clarity and even amusement. The jets, confident in their superiority, began to make errors, overextending, miscalculating their approaches, underestimating her ability to anticipate their moves. Each mistake they made was an opportunity she seized with precision. "Lieutenant Caldwell, they're closing in from the left," one of the junior pilots called out, tension evident in his voice. Sarah didn't panic. She adjusted her trajectory, banking sharply to evade the simulated missile lock and repositioning herself behind a cloud bank to obscure her movements. Her sensors and experience allowed her to track the jets even when they couldn't see her, turning their aggression into vulnerability. Through it all, her calm laugh occasionally echoed over the comms, a subtle reminder that she was in control, that she had expected the challenge, and that doubt would not shake her. The sound unnerved the fighter pilots more than any maneuver. It was a laugh born not of mockery, but of certainty, a demonstration of someone who knew her limits and refused to let others dictate her worth. Hours passed in this high-stakes dance. Fuel levels dropped, muscles ached, and fatigue threatened to compromise her focus, but Sarah pressed on. She relied not only on skill, but on experience, intuition, and the unyielding mental strength that had carried her through every challenge of her career. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the exercise concluded. Sarah had outmaneuvered. Every jet defended the target area with remarkable efficiency and maintained her composure throughout the simulation. The pilots who had doubted her now communicated with a tone that was less cocky and more cautious, their confidence tempered by the reality of her skill. When she landed back on the tarmac, her body was tense, but her spirit was unbroken. The roar of the engines quieted to a hum, leaving behind a profound silence broken only by the murmurs of those who had watched her performance. Colonel Daniels approached, his expression unreadable, but his eyes carrying a hint of pride. "Lieutenant Caldwell, your performance today exceeded expectations. You demonstrated not only skill but resilience and strategy. Well done." Sarah offered a small nod, the weight of validation settling over her. She had faced the doubt, the mockery, and the skepticism and emerged victorious. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Challenges would continue, and some would be far more dangerous than a simulated exercise dot. As she climbed out of the cockpit, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The skies above Cedar Springs were vast and unpredictable, much like the path she had chosen for herself. But she had proven to herself and to everyone who doubted her that she was capable of facing any challenge with courage, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. In the distance, the small town lay bathed in the golden light of late morning, unaware of the battles fought above it. Sarah glanced toward the horizon, the faintest smile touching her lips. She knew that the true tests were yet to come, but she was ready. Her laugh, calm and confident, would echo in the skies, a reminder that underestimation could be a dangerous mistake, especially when faced with someone who refused to be defeated. By the time evening settled over Fort Reynolds, the base had quieted, the usual hum of activity replaced by a calm that carried an undercurrent of tension. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and violet, a deceptive serenity that often belied the hidden dangers of aerial operations. Sarah Caldwell walked along the edge of the tarmac, her flight suit unzipped slightly at the collar, the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders. The high-stakes simulation earlier that day had been demanding, but nothing compared to the sense of unease that had settled into her chest. There were whispers among some of the pilot's questions about her ability to handle more than routine exercises, subtle doubts that suggested she might falter under real pressure. She had faced doubt before, but this time it carried a more insidious edge. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Colonel Daniels. "Report to operations room immediately. Incoming real-world engagement." Not a drill. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but out of the sudden weight of responsibility. She had trained for combat, for the possibility of hostile engagements, but real-world scenarios carried consequences far beyond simulation. Lives, property, and the integrity of the base now hung in the balance. Inside the operations room, the air was thick with tension. Maps and radar screens flickered with movement, tracking unidentified aircraft approaching U.S. airspace. Senior officers exchanged terse words, their faces grim. The fighter jet pilots, who had just yesterday been mocking her, now looked nervous, uncertain. The unspoken acknowledgement was clear. Skill mattered far more than gender or seniority in this moment. "Lieutenant Caldwell," Colonel Daniels said, gesturing toward her station, "we need you to intercept and engage. These aircraft are unidentified and potentially hostile. Intelligence suggests they could be armed. You'll have support from the fighter squadron, but they will be relying on your maneuverability and tactical expertise to lead the engagement." Sarah took a deep breath, grounding herself. Her hands rested on the controls of her Apache, the familiar weight of responsibility, both daunting and empowering. She could feel the collective gaze of the base on her, the mixture of hope, doubt, and expectation. As she lifted off, the first hints of nightfall painted the landscape below in muted shades of gray. The fighter jets flanked her, their engines roaring in synchronized precision. The approaching aircraft were distant blurs on radar, but the threat they posed was immediate and undeniable. Communication channels crackled with tension. "Caldwell, these targets are fast-moving. They're maintaining formation, aggressive vectors." One pilot reported, Sarah's mind raced, but she remained outwardly calm, her experience guiding her movements. She led the formation with precision, calculating approaches, anticipating the enemy's patterns, and maintaining the safety of the base and town below. The engagement began with sudden ferocity. The unidentified aircraft maneuvered aggressively, testing their formation and capabilities. Fighter jets attempted flanking maneuvers, but Sarah's Apache, nimble and responsive, cut through their tactics with calculated precision. In the midst of the chaos, doubts from the past surfaced in her mind, echoes of the years when she had been mocked, belittled, and dismissed. She remembered the jeers of Mitchell, Riley, and others who had underestimated her. Those memories fueled her determination, her focus sharpened by the knowledge that failure was not an option. "Target on your 6. One of the jets warned, the tension in his voice betraying fear. Sarah twisted the controls, banking sharply, her helicopter darting between shadows of clouds and patches of moonlight. The enemy fired simulated missiles, then real ones, guided by sensors and intelligence, but her agility and keen instincts allowed her to evade every strike. Then, unexpectedly, a new threat emerged. One of the unidentified aircraft broke formation, aiming directly at a nearby civilian area. The risk of collateral damage spiked her adrenaline, forcing her to make a split-second decision. With courage and clarity, she maneuvered her Apache to intercept, drawing fire toward herself and away. From the town below, the enemy's path was blocked, the civilians spared, but the cost was clear. She had exposed herself to extreme danger. Over the coms, the fighter pilots fell silent, the tension palpable. Then, Sarah allowed herself a moment of controlled triumph. Her laugh, calm but sharp, echoed through the channel, a sound that conveyed mastery, defiance, and reassurance all at once. It was not mocking, but it was impossible to ignore. "You underestimated me," she said simply, voice steady. "That was your mistake." The remaining unidentified aircraft, perhaps sensing her skill and confidence, began to falter. There, maneuvers grew erratic. Sarah exploited the opening, coordinating with the fighter pilots to neutralize the threat and regain control of the airspace. By the time the engagement ended, the unidentified aircraft had been forced to retreat, leaving. The skies over Cedar Springs calm once more. Sarah landed back at Fort Reynolds to a mixture of relief, admiration, and quiet awe. The fighter pilots who had once jeered at her now regarded her with newfound respect, their previous arrogance replaced by the acknowledgement of her exceptional skill and courage. Colonel Daniels approached, his eyes betraying both pride and concern. "Lieutenant Caldwell," he said, voice low but firm, "you saved lives tonight. Your judgment and bravery under pressure were exceptional. The town owes you its safety. The squadron owes you its respect. And I—" He paused, collecting himself. "I knew you could handle this. But you went beyond what I expected." Sarah nodded, exhaustion heavy in her bones, but pride firm in her chest. She had faced not only the threat in the skies, but the subtle prejudice and doubt that had shadowed her career. She had proven, without question, that courage, skill, and resolve were not dictated by gender or expectation. Later that night, Sarah stood alone on the base perimeter, gazing up at the stars. The sky stretched endlessly above Cedar Springs, a canvas of possibility and danger. She had survived, had triumphed, and had begun to turn skepticism into respect. But deep down, she knew that the challenges were far from over. There were higher stakes yet, more dangerous threats, and those who still sought to undermine her. Her laugh, calm, confident, unshakable, echoed in her memory. It would not be the last time she used it. And as the night wind brushed across her face, she made a silent vow. She would never let doubt, prejudice, or fear dictate her path. She would fight, not just for herself, but for justice, for the truth, and for every underestimated soul who had been told they could not soar. The days following the engagement were heavy with a strange combination of relief and unease. Sarah Caldwell returned to her daily routines at Fort Reynolds, but the atmosphere had shifted. Though the skies over Cedar Springs had been secured, subtle undercurrents of tension flowed through the base. Whispers in corridors, sidelong glances from senior officers, and curt tones from some fighter pilots reminded her that, even in victory, trust was fragile. She spent hours reviewing flight logs, performance data, and sensor readings, ensuring every action during the engagement had been documented. Even as Colonel Daniels praised her decisiveness and skill, she sensed something more. There were those who weren't happy with the recognition she had earned, people who resented her abilities, her courage, and the attention she now commanded. It started with small incidents, missing equipment, altered mission logs, and unexplained anomalies in simulation exercises. At first, they seemed trivial, easily dismissed as bureaucratic errors. But Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. These were deliberate, subtle efforts to undermine her reputation and raise questions about her judgment. One afternoon, she was summoned to a private meeting with Major Hawkins, a veteran pilot who had once been a mentor to her. His expression was grave, his voice measured. "Caldwell," he said, closing the door behind them, "I need to warn you. Not everyone is happy about your rise. Some officers have been questioning your decisions, scrutinizing your performance in ways that go beyond standard protocol. Be careful. The higher-ups are watching closely, and not all of them want you to succeed." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Are you saying they're trying to sabotage me?" Hawkins nodded slowly. "It's subtle, but yes. They're waiting for any misstep to use against you. They'll look for reasons to discredit you, to make it seem like your victory was a fluke. You have to stay vigilant." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and prejudice before, but betrayal from within her own ranks carried a different sting. The realization fueled a mix of anger and determination. She would not be undermined, and she would not allow those who sought to diminish her courage to succeed. That evening, she returned to the hangar alone. The Apache, her trusted companion, gleamed under the overhead lights. Sarah ran her hands along its frame, her mind racing with strategies to protect herself and the integrity of her missions. Every system, every sensor, every protocol would be double-checked. No one would use her machine or her reputation against her. The first clear act of sabotage came during a routine night flight. The Apache's targeting system flickered unpredictably, and communications with the control tower were briefly interrupted. In the darkness above Cedar Springs, Sarah's instincts took over. She relied on manual controls, her extensive training, and years of experience to stabilize the helicopter. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she navigated the machine back to base, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the adrenaline of betrayal realized. Once safely on the tarmac, she convened with Colonel Daniels and her most trusted team members. The investigation began immediately. Logs were cross-referenced, systems analyzed, and surveillance reviewed. By morning, the evidence was undeniable. Someone within the base had tampered with her Apache systems, putting her life at risk. Revelation rocked the base. Some officers feigned shock, others avoided eye contact, and a few whispered in corners, casting glances her way. But Sarah stood firm, her presence commanding respect even as anger simmered beneath the surface. "Whoever did this," she said, in a voice that carried through the briefing room, "thought they could scare me, discredit me, or force me out. They miscalculated." Her eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of every officer present. "I will not be intimidated. I will not be undermined. And I will find the truth." The investigation revealed more than just sabotage. It uncovered a web of jealousy and politics. Some pilots had been threatened by her skill and feared the attention she had earned from higher command. Others resented that a woman had consistently proven herself in a field dominated by men. The exposure of these motives sent shockwaves through Fort Reynolds, but Sarah refused to allow anger to dictate her actions. She would confront the issue with precision, strategy, and the same discipline that had kept her alive in the skies. Her next mission was not just about aerial combat. It became a test of character, resolve, and cunning. Sarah coordinated with Colonel Daniels to set a controlled exercise, deliberately giving access to information in a way that would reveal the saboteurs. The setup required careful timing, trust in her instincts, and the courage to face those who would seek to harm her career. When the trap was set, the saboteurs acted predictably. Their attempts to interfere with the exercise were recorded and documented. Confronted with undeniable evidence, the perpetrators were forced to admit their actions. Some offered excuses, some refused to acknowledge the damage they had caused, but all were stripped of the authority to interfere with Sarah's missions again. Through this ordeal, Sarah's reputation transformed. Those who had doubted her were now forced to recognize her resilience, intelligence, and unshakable integrity. Her laughter, calm, measured, and confident, echoed again, not in the cockpit this time, but through the corridors of Fort Reynolds. A quiet but unmistakable reminder that she could not be defeated by fear, sabotage, or prejudice. In the quiet of her quarters that night, Sarah reflected on the events. The betrayal had stung, but it had also strengthened her. She had faced danger from both the skies and the human heart, and emerged not only alive, but stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. She looked out the window toward the town of Cedar Springs, the faint lights twinkling below. The residents went about their lives unaware of the battles fought above them and within the walls of the base. Sarah smiled faintly. She had proven her skill, protected the innocent, and exposed the truth. And she knew, deep down, that the challenges ahead would require even more courage, intelligence, and heart. Because the skies were vast, and threats, both seen and unseen, would always return. The morning air over Fort Reynolds was unusually still, carrying the faint scent of fuel, earth, and the distant town of Cedar Springs. Sarah Caldwell stood on the tarmac, her flight suit snug, boots firmly planted, and her eyes scanning the horizon. Today was not a simulation, nor a test of ego or politics. It was the real thing. Intelligence had reported a high-level threat. Multiple hostile aircraft, heavily armed and maneuvering with dangerous precision, were approaching U.S. airspace. This was a mission that required flawless skill, leadership, and split-second decision-making. And for the first time, Sarah would lead not just the fighter jets, but the entire tactical engagement. Her Apache, gleaming under the pale morning sun, waited like an extension of herself. Every panel, every sensor, every control was familiar, trusted. As she ran through her pre-flight checklist, she felt the familiar hum of readiness building in her chest. This mission would not be just a test of skill. It would be a test of resolve, courage, and the culmination of every challenge she had faced. Colonel Daniels approached, his expression a mix of concern and pride. "Caldwell, this is it. All eyes are on you. But I have complete confidence in your abilities. Lead with your instincts, protect your team, and protect the civilians below. You know what's at stake." Sarah nodded, swallowing the tension that threatened to rise. She had been underestimated, mocked, and sabotaged, but never broken. Every obstacle had honed her, sharpened her judgment, and strengthened her resolve. As she lifted off, the fighter jets flanking her in formation, the radio channels buzzed with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The hostile aircraft appeared on radar fast, coordinated, and intent on their target. Caldwell, Formation Alpha ready to engage, one of the pilots reported. Sarah's voice was calm, steady, and authoritative. Maintain formation. Trust. My lead. Watch for unpredictable maneuvers and protect the target area at all costs. The engagement began instantly. The hostile aircraft surged forward with lethal precision, testing her every move. Fighter jets attempted to flank the Apache, but Sarah's strategy, honed through years of training and prior engagements, allowed her to anticipate their maneuvers and counter them effectively. Amid the chaos, one of the hostile planes broke formation and aimed directly at a civilian settlement near Cedar Springs. Sarah's heart pounded, but her instincts and courage took over. She maneuvered her Apache to intercept, positioning herself between the threat and the town. The hostile pilot fired a missile, but Sarah's agility, precise calculation, and nerves of steel allowed her to evade it and redirect the attack. Caldwell, you're in position, but they're adapting. A pilot called over COMM stock, she allowed herself a brief, steadying laugh, the same calm, confident sound that had unsettled doubters in the past. It carried no mockery, only focus and control. Adaptation is expected. Stay sharp. I've got this. Her maneuvers were precise, almost surgical, weaving between the enemy attacks, coordinating with the fighter jets, and drawing the hostile pilots into traps she had predicted. One by one, their formation faltered. They had underestimated her. Skill, courage, and strategic mind exactly as she had anticipated. As the engagement reached its climax, Sarah faced a critical moment. Two hostile aircraft were converging on the same target zone simultaneously, and one misstep could result in catastrophic damage. With her team relying on her leadership, she made a split-second decision. Using the Apache's advanced targeting systems, she executed a maneuver that drew the planes into a narrow corridor, forcing them to collide mid-air. The explosions lit the sky, a powerful display of precision and strategy, leaving the remaining hostile aircraft disoriented and retreating. The skies above Cedar Springs fell silent, the town safe, and her squadron intact. Landing back at Fort Reynolds, Sarah was greeted with awe, respect, and unrestrained admiration. The fighter pilots who had once doubted her now regarded her as a leader, a force of skill, courage, and integrity. The saboteurs and doubters had been silenced not by anger or retaliation, but by undeniable proof of her excellence. Colonel Daniels approached, his expression uncharacteristically soft. Lieutenant Caldwell, you've not only saved the town, but you've proven something far greater, that courage, intelligence, and perseverance define a leader, not bias or preconception. You have earned the respect of every person here. Sarah's smile was quiet, but unwavering. The laughter that had carried through the skies that day, calm, confident, and victorious, echoed again in her mind. She had faced doubt, betrayal, and mortal danger, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. That evening, as she stood on the base perimeter overlooking Cedar Springs, the town illuminated in the soft glow of twilight, she felt a profound sense of closure. The battles she had fought, both in the skies and within the walls of the base, had forged her into a leader who could not be undermined or underestimated. But more than victory, more than recognition, Sarah felt a deep sense of justice. She had exposed betrayal, upheld integrity, and demonstrated that skill and courage transcended prejudice. She had turned mockery into respect, doubt into admiration, and fear into triumph. And as the stars began to sparkle above her, reflecting on the quiet town she had protected, Sarah knew one truth above all: the skies belonged to those who earned them, not those who claimed superiority by birth or rank. Her journey was not only about survival or victory, it was about the relentless pursuit of justice, the courage to face every challenge, and the unshakable belief that truth and skill would always rise above doubt. And tonight, the laughter that had once unsettled her critics now belonged entirely to her, a triumphant, echoing symbol of strength, resilience, and redemption. The dawn over Cedar Springs was gentle, almost serene, but for Sarah Caldwell, there was no time for rest. The events of the past weeks had left an indelible mark on her victory. Yes, but also the knowledge that battles were not only fought in the skies, but within human hearts. The town she had saved slept peacefully, unaware of the dangers they had narrowly avoided. But Sarah knew that protection came not from fear, but from vigilance, courage, and unwavering integrity. Back at Fort Reynolds, the atmosphere was tense, yet transformative. The saboteurs and those who had doubted her were under formal investigation, their attempts at undermining her career documented and undeniable. Their influence, once a shadow over her accomplishments, had been permanently diminished. Sarah had not sought revenge, but justice, and the results spoke louder than any anger could have. Colonel Daniels called a base-wide briefing. Sarah entered the room, her posture calm, confident, and commanding. She felt the eyes of the officers, pilots, and support staff upon her. Some looked at her with lingering doubt, others with admiration, and a few with a newfound respect that carried humility. Lieutenant Caldwell, Daniels began, has proven beyond any question that skill, courage, and integrity define a leader. Her actions in the skies and her handling of internal sabotage have ensured the safety of Cedar Springs and the credibility of this base. She has earned the respect of every one of us. The room erupted into applause, not the polite kind that echoes through halls, but genuine recognition from those who had once questioned her. Sarah's lips curved into a faint smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey she had undertaken, but it wasn't just about recognition. That afternoon, she was invited to meet with the town council of Cedar Springs. Residents, from longtime townsfolk to children, waving handmade flags, gathered to honor her courage. For Sarah, it was a moment of profound satisfaction, not for herself, but for the truth she had defended and the lives she had protected. As she addressed the crowd, she spoke not of glory or accolades, but of responsibility, integrity, and perseverance. "We face challenges every day," she said, her voice steady and heartfelt. "Some come from the skies above, some from those around us. But courage isn't about never facing fear. It's about standing firm, making the right choice, and protecting what matters. I am grateful for every person who trusted me, and I hope that we all remember that strength comes from integrity, and respect is earned, not given." The crowd erupted in applause again, but this time there were tears, smiles, and an unspoken acknowledgement of the rare courage that had emerged from one woman's determination. Sarah felt a sense of completion she hadn't known in years. The knowledge that she had faced injustice, danger, and doubt, and had emerged not just victorious, but respected and vindicated. Later, back on the tarmac, she climbed into her Apache. One final time. The engines roared to life, the hum vibrating through her body, familiar and comforting. She rose into the sky above Cedar Springs, watching as the town below glimmered in the fading light of the afternoon. The skies had been her proving ground, her battleground, and now her sanctuary. As she hovered above the town, Sarah allowed herself a moment of laughter, clear, strong, and echoing across the empty air. It was not the laughter of mockery, not the laughter of triumph over petty rivals, but the laughter of one who had endured, survived, and redeemed herself in every sense. The same laugh that had once unnerved her skeptics now belonged entirely to her. From the shadows of the base to the bright streets of Cedar Springs, her journey had transformed not only her own life, but the hearts and minds of those who had once underestimated her. She had faced the impossible, overcome betrayal, and claimed her rightful place as a pilot, a protector, and a leader dot as she banked gently toward the horizon, the sun dipping low behind distant hills. Sarah Caldwell knew that this was more than victory. It was proof that courage, skill, and integrity, when wielded with steadfast determination, could overcome any obstacle. And in the quiet glow of the evening, one truth remained unshakable. Those who had doubted her, underestimated her, or sought to undermine her had learned the hardest lesson of all. Her strength was not defined by the sky she flew in, nor by the machines she commanded. It was defined by the unyielding heart that refused to break. Sarah's laughter lingered in the wind, a triumphant echo over Cedar Springs, a symbol of resilience, justice, and the enduring power of one person who refused to be silenced. The town slept peacefully below. The base stood vigilant, and above it all, Sarah soared an Apache pilot, a defender, and a force no one would ever underestimate again.